Hello and welcome back to Big LEZ'S League and All Rugby League Experience. I'm your host, Big Les. We're going to do something a little different. So obviously you're used to hearing the Team List Tuesday release right about now, to be honest, on YouTube and on all podcasting platforms. Doing something a little different this week. Not going to be the usual going forward, obviously. If you haven't seen the story yet or the post I put out today yet, I will be going on a retreat Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I'm recording this Tuesday night if you're a bit confused. But Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm going to be away on a retreat, on a school retreat, which means that I won't be able to record anything and there'll be no posts out over the next few days. It's the reason that I'm doing this right now. So what I'm going to do for you guys is I'm going to do a massive preview of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday games. And then I'm going to put this whole video, which you're watching right now, or if you're watching YouTube, if you're listening to the audio, you're a little bit confused, filling you guys in. I'm going to put this whole video on YouTube. So if you want to go watch the whole thing on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify, go ahead and watch the video. This will all go on YouTube, and then I'll crop it into 4 parts, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and that will go on the podcast, whether that's Spotify, whether that's Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, that's where the cropped bits will go. But let's get straight into the preview going into round 3, guys. Super excited. This is going to be a pretty sick round and a pretty unpredictable one as well in terms of how tips go. I will get my tips up as well so I can run through my tips for the week at the end. But let's get straight into it. The first game, it is the Manly Seagulls v. the Parramatta Eels on Thursday night. And I'm super keen for this one. I think it's going to be quite close, closer than people think as well. But let's go through the team list for this one. So for the Manly Seagulls, Tom Trbojevic is at fullback, Christian Tuipulotu and Ruben Garrick are on the wings, Brad Parker and Tolutau Kaula are in the centres. Josh Schuster and Dally Cherry-Evans are in the halves. Taniela Paseka and Jake Trbojevic are in the front row. Lachlan Croker at 9. Hamole Olakawatu and Kelma Tuolagi are in the back row. Josh Laa at lock. Ko Weeks, Ben Trbojevic, Ethan Bullymore and Sean Kepi there on the bench there for the Manly Seagulls. Now, a little bit confused about this one, and I think that Manly fans themselves will be a little bit confused. Obviously, Jake Trbojevic has made the permanent move to the front row. For me, I thought that was going to be a little bit of a hint that obviously Cooper Johns was going to lock down the number 6 spot, and obviously Schuster was going to come in and play 13. Maybe we thought wrong. Maybe they're just moving Jake Trbojevic to prop. Maybe we digged a little too deep into that one. Cooper Johns in the reserves. I think that's a bit heavy, especially after his round 1 performance. He was outstanding. He's been outstanding in the trials as well. I'm really confused, to be honest, as to why Cooper Johns would be dropped from the team. But Schuster comes in. He's playing 6. We get to see get a first little taste of Schuster there in the number 6 jersey for Manly as well. I think particularly because they've been just off with the bye, it's going to make them a little stronger going into this week as well. Tom Trbojevic has had a rest. Hopefully he plays at 100% or, gets to 100% very, very soon. Jolly Cherry-Evans as well. He's coming off a massive game in round 1. Then he gets the rest. Then he's coming to verse the Parramatta Eels, who are 0 from 2 at the moment. They could be 0 from 3 versus Manly at home as well. It's another factor that the Parramatta Eels fans and all you guys putting punts and tips in have to consider here. Manly are fresh off a bye and they're at home versing the Parramatta Eels, who are 0 from 2 at the moment. But let's go through this Parramatta Real side. So Gutho's at fullback, Mike Acevo and Bailey Simonson are on the wings. Will Penasini and Wonga Blake are in the centres. Dylan Brown and Mitch Moses are in the halves. We have Regan Campbell-Gillard and Junior Paulo in the front row with Josh Hodgson at 9. Bryce Cartwright and Matt Dory are in the back row with Jermaine Hopgood at 13. And then we have Jerome Mazea, Jack Murchie, Wiremu Greg, and Makaeshi Makatoa. It's a pretty strong bench there from the Parramatta Eels. Can they get their first win? Now, look, the Guru did make the point that I just mentioned before, obviously with Manly coming in fresh after the bye, but while Parramatta have been 0 from 2, They have looked good in both games. They have had stars in both games, and they've nearly won both games. They've been competitive in both games as well. I think it will be still very competitive, but we could potentially see Parramatta 0 from 3. We could potentially see Parramatta 0 from 3. I'm going to go and double check what I tipped here as well. Because obviously I made my tips earlier in the week thinking that I wouldn't have time to make them later on, or that I would forget when I went onto the retreat. But look, it's going to be a very, very interesting game, this one. Manly at home, fresh off a bye. It's a big call to go ahead and tip Manly there. I think that the Eels, though, they're going to come in hungry. They're going to come in match fit, and they're probably, for me, now, I think it's a big call either way, but I've got the Parramatta Eels in this one. I think regardless of all the points that I've just made, I think the Parramatta, as I said, come in hungry. They've got the match fitness behind them. Obviously, the Manly Seagulls, they have had the week off. I mean, it's a very, very hard one to pick. It's a very hard one to pick. If Tom Trbojevic is playing at 100%, if DCE plays anything like he did on the other weekend, obviously in round one, Manly could get on a real roll here, and obviously Parramatta have fallen under pressure over the past 2 weeks. So they're 0 from 2, guys. Parramatta are 0 from 2 going into this year. I'm looking for guys like Jermaine Hopgood to have another big game. Mitch Moses has definitely got to step up there alongside Dylan Brown. I'm a little bit skeptical of Josh Schuster at 6, which is probably another reason I'm going to go for Parramatta. Obviously, Dylan Brown has spent more time in this 6 role over the past few years, whereas we've seen Schuster a bit bigger coming in and playing in the back row and at 13 off the bench even, and not playing many minutes at all last year. Look, it's a very interesting one. I'm going to go Parramatta. I'm going to go for Parramatta 1 to 12. As I said, could swing either way, and there's plenty of reasons to go ahead and tip Manly here. I am going to go rogue. I am going to go for Parramatta. And I'm going to take them at 1 to 12 in this game. In terms of anytime try scorers, just off the bat here, I'm listening to this one. And by the way, guys, as well, unfortunately, for Thursday and Friday, I won't be able to do anytime takes. Saturday and Sunday, I'll make an effort to do those takes, the anytime takes, but I probably won't be able to do them realistically being on the retreat. And obviously, there's no posts and anything like that while I'm on the retreat, regardless. But since I won't be have many time to do these anytime try scorers, just make sure you listen into this podcast to have a listen to, obviously, my takes on these anytime try scorers. But for me, if I'm picking one from Manly, it's got to be Tom Trbojevic. I think he scores in this game, especially if Manly get on the front foot. If I'm picking another one here from the Parramatta Eels, I'm going to go a bit, I don't know. I could go a bit rogue here and pick one of the forwards, obviously, because both forwards have scored over the past 2 weeks. Regan Campbell-Gillard scored last week, and Junior Paulo scored the week before against Melbourne. I'm going to go, and I've gone him a few times over the past few weeks, but he just looks like an absolute unit, and he looks dangerous in some moments of games. And, if he really gets on a roll this year, he could be anything. I'm going to go for Wonga Blake as an anytime try scorer as well. You're going a bit rogue there. I like Wonga Blake. I imagine he'd be at good odds. So Tom Trbojevic and Wonga Blake anytime try scorers. I've got Parramatta 1 to 12. The next game is the Newcastle Knights v the Dolphins, obviously on your Friday night at 6 p.m. This one, again, is going to be another interesting one. Obviously, the Knights are without Kalen Ponga and Lockie Miller. But a big thing for the Dolphins, not Lockie Miller. They're without Kalen Ponga, and they're also without, let me scroll down to the outs here. Oh, yes, Jaden Brayley and Jacob Saifidi and Tyson Frizzell. That is a lot of losses there for the Newcastle Knights. That is going to really hurt them going into this one. But the big thing for me for the Dolphins, which kind of makes it a little bit difficult to pick this game, is the absence of Jeremy Marshall-King. Obviously, he's being suspended. Obviously, he got sent off on the weekend against the Raiders. Look, it's a big one. It is a real big one because Jeremy Marshall-King, he is a pivotal part of the Dolphins' attack, and he's main reason, I guess, of why they're getting so frequently on the front foot here. It is because of Jeremy Marshall-King and the efforts that he puts in attack and defense as well. He's an absolute freak. We've seen that over the past 2 weeks in both of the Dolphins' wins. Dolphins are 2-0 Dolphins have won both round 1 and 2, and it's definitely something we didn't expect. But let's go through these lineups before we make any wild predictions here. So for the Newcastle Knights, we've got Lockie Miller at fullback, Heimel Hunt and Dominic Young on the wings, Dane Gagai, Bradman Best in the centres, Tyson Gamble, Jackson Hastings in the halves, Daniel Saifidi and Jack Hetherington in the front row. Fuck, I love that. Phoenix Crossland at 9, going a bit rogue there with Crossland at 9. I love it. Brodie Jones and Lockie Fitzgibbon in the back row, Leo Thompson at lock. Ryan Rivet, I believe this guy would probably be making his debut, considering I haven't heard this name before. I can't tell you much about him because I don't know him. Matt Croker, obviously, I think he's returning. If I go to the ins, yep, he's returning. I can't wait to see Matty Croker in his first game of the year. Jack Johns, look, a bit concerned because I thought he was injured. But anyway, and then Dylan Lucas, I believe I've seen his name before, so I don't think it's his debut, but it could be wrong. On the bench there for the Newey Knights. Very, very keen to see how Matt Croker goes. I feel like he could be a game changer. Probably coming off the bench and playing in the 13 jersey, playing that lock forward sort of role. He's one to definitely watch because he played well last year when he came into the side for Newcastle. So definitely one to watch there, Matty Croker. Yeah, look, I mean, very, very interested to see how Knights go here. It's going to be a big test without their big stars in Callum Ponga and particularly Jaden Brayley through the middle. And I think they're going to suffer, obviously, losing Jaden Brayley because they haven't got a Chris Randall to come in and take that spot anymore. Obviously, Chris Randall, they traded him for Greg Marju. I think they'd be sort of scratching their head about that decision. But yeah, look, I mean, it's a very depleted Knights side coming up against a 2-0 Dolphins side, which I can't believe I'm even saying that now. But let's have a look at the Dolphins lineup for the Dolphins. We have Hamiso Tabuai Fido at fullback, Jermaine Asako and Tessie New on the wings, Ewan Aiken, Brenko Lee in the centres, Isaiah Katoa and Sean O'Sullivan in the halves, Jesse Bromwich and Jared Wallace in the front row, Cody Nikorima at 9. I actually think that's going to be interesting. I think that's going to work out quite well. Obviously, they're very different nines in terms of, how they play the game. But I feel like Cody Nikorima is more of a zippy 9 as well, and he's got that halves experience as well. So got like a bit of kicking game out of dummy half, which I love. And I think he went okay at 9 when he had to play there for South Sydney, obviously off the bench in that 14 jersey. But look, very keen to see how Cody Nikorima goes at 9. They've got a very strange hooking rotation because it's him and then it's Kurt Donahue off the bench playing a bit of 9, as we saw in round 1. So Cody Nikorima is at 9. The only thing I'm worried about here is if they put Donahue anywhere else, Cody Nikorima is going to have to play the full 80. But Cody Nikorima is at 9. Felice Fusi, who has had 2 massive weeks, and I think he's going to be the game changer. We'll get to that in a second. Kenny Bromwich in the back row. Tom Gilbert at 13. Colony Lemonlelu, Mark Nichols, Ray Stone comes back from injury as well. Fuck, if he isn't just pure masculinity, I don't know what is. And then Kurt Donahue there on the bench for the Dolphins. Very, very keen to see how the Dolphins go without Jeremy Marshall-King. I think they get the win here. I think they get it 1-12. I think it's still going to be a tight game. I mean, Tyson Gamble's in the 6 jersey, so you're not losing too much. It's a guy that's played first grade in the number 6 before and frequently for the Brisbane Broncos. You're not losing too much there. Obviously, Kurt Mann's out. You're losing a little bit at 13. But I actually think it's good. I think it's good because you're playing someone else at 13 who's got a bit more size in the middle. And Kurt Mann, he was just used as a battering ram. They didn't use him properly in that 13 jersey. Kurt Mann, for me, would be a great ball-playing sort of roaming player rather than the battering ram and the weight they're getting on him. And I just think it's wrong. I think that Kurt Mann is a better 6. I think it's proven the time that he had there with Mitchell Pearce just says it all. But Tyson Gamble at 6, don't mind it. Phoenix Crossland at 9, scratching the head a little bit. I think Ryan Rivet, I haven't checked his position, but I would assume that he'd probably be coming off the bench and playing hooker because I don't think Crossland's going to play the full 80 at 9. If he is, then I'm a bit concerned. I think that the Dolphins could definitely leak a few points through the middle. I haven't seen too much of Crossland at 9, so I'd have to see it before I believe in it. But I'm taking the Dolphins. I'm taking the Dolphins 1-12. Anytime try scorers for me off the top of the cap. You got to listen to the podcast for your anytime try scorers this week. I'm going to go Dane Gagai in the centres. I think that one's going to be quite interesting. Obviously had a big game last week. think that he can definitely come into this game and score a few meat pies, or maybe one, maybe just one, but he could score a few if he wanted to. So Dane Gagai there in the centres. And then I'm going to go for a wild card here. I'm going to say Isaiah Katoa scores a try in a Dolphins jersey. I would love to see it. Isaiah Katoa, anytime try scorer, I imagine it'd be good value. So hop on it while you can. Dane Gagai and Tessie New as anytime try scorers. But yeah, look, for me, Dolphins 1-12. Think that the Knights are going to struggle without KP in terms of getting on the front foot. It's going to have to be a big game by Jackson Hastings, Lockie Miller. Look, I feel like he's been a little bit conservative over the past few weeks. We know the talent that he has. We've seen it in his rugby sevens days, I believe. I think it was rugby sevens. We've also seen it when he played for the Cronulla Sharks as well. We know how much talent he has. And I think that he just needs to sort of loosen up a bit and really, really, put a big effort in to get his side on the front foot. I think that's a big thing for Lockie Miller this week. And Jackson Hastings needs to stand up for me. I feel like we haven't seen the best of Jackson Hastings yet. I feel like he needs to really stand up in this game. But look, guys like Isaiah Katoa, Sean O'Sullivan, Hamiso Taviwai, Fado, Jermaine Asako, if they get the ball out to him, he's going to be a freak. And Mark Nichols off the bench has been putting in massive, massive efforts. It's going to have to be a big effort from the Newcastle Knights if they are to get the win in this game. Obviously, at home, they would like to get. I think it's their first win of the season. No, it would be their second because they obviously won last week. They would love to get a win at home. But yeah, look, for me, I only see the Dolphins winning this one without KP and without Jaden Brayley as well, a massive part of their offense. And Jacob Saifidi, don't forget, a guy that played Origin last year, along with Tyson Frizzell, who is a Origin back rower. I mean, I can only see the Dolphins winning this one, but they only win it 1-12 for me. For the Roosters v the Rabbitohs game, I'm going to be lucky enough to go down to this one myself. If you haven't noticed already, the glasses are on, which means Big Les is sounding a lot smarter and talking a lot more fluently, which is something I love because I love to stumble my words. If you listen to the podcast frequently, you know how much I love to have a little bit of a stumble of the words. But Roosters v Rabbitohs, super keen for this game. I think it's going to be a super tight one. I think it's going to be tighter than people think. I'm a bit scared for Brandon Smith. Now, he's obviously had to leave the field early in both round 1 and round 2 due to those back rib sort of issues. I think the back issue is a cover-up for the rib injury. Obviously, he suffered against Felice Kaufusi. So, yeah, a bit worried about Brandon Smith in this game at 9. I think South Sydney would be stupid not to target him with their front rowers and with the guys taking hit-ups. Just run straight at Brandon Smith. I know Brandon Smith can do a lot of damage to people. But, yeah, look, a bit worried for Brandon Smith there. Ups for the Roosters. They are getting Jared back. They also get Victor Radley back as well. I mean, a front row pairing of Lindsay Collins and Jared Warrior-Hargreaves is just absolutely fucking insane. But let's go through the Roosters lineup here. So James Tedesco is at fullback. Daniel Tupou and Jackson Paulo are on the wings. Joseph Suali'i and Joseph Manu are in the centres. Luke Keary, Sam Walker are in the halves. Jared Warrior-Hargreaves and Lindsay Collins are in the front row with Brandon Smith at 9. Egan Butcher and Nat Butcher in the back row. Victor Radley at 13. And then we have Jake Turpin, Drew Hutchison, Terrell May, and Fletcher Baker on the bench for the Roosters. As I said, a little bit worried about Brandon Smith. I think it's going to have to be a big game by James Tedesco and Manu in this one. Look, I was looking for something from them last week, didn't get it. But look, I'm very, very keen to see them step up in this game, particularly Manu with his rivalry here with Latrell Mitchell. I think that he is going to stand up in this game. It's going to be a big game from Manu. But yeah, look, as I said, worried about Brandon Smith. Jake Turpin. I imagine Brandon Smith, to be honest, and this is my little prediction going into the weekend, I reckon Brandon Smith's going to be a late rule out. They're probably going to have Turpin or Hutcho to start at 9. I think it might be Hutcho. And I think I might have already talked about this on the podcast already, but I think that Hutcho will have to start, or maybe I was talking about it with someone else, but I think Hutcho might come in and start at 9 for the Roosters. I don't feel confident that Brandon Smith's going to play this week. I think he's been named, but I think he'll be a late rule out. I think he'll succumb to that rib or back injury. I'd love to see Sandon Smith get a crack. As I said before, I think it was actually in the review of the round that I recorded yesterday. That I think I just love to see Sandon Smith get a crack. I loved what I saw from him in the trials. And I'd also love to see Sua Wong get a crack as well from either a Fletcher Baker or a Terrell May. Um, they do need a bit of size on the bench, particularly going up against Tame Sele, Davey Moali, Shakai Mitchell. So I understand why they've got Terrell May and Fletcher Baker on the bench here. But two guys I'd love to see get a crack for the Roosters would be Sandon Smith and Sua Wong. I think Sandon Smith's the more likely one, obviously, because I think Brandon Smith, as I said, might be a late rule out here. But look, all the best for the Roosters. If Brandon Smith's 100%, he's 100%. And I'm super excited to see a fully fit Brandon Smith go up against the Rabbitohs. But it just doesn't look realistic, obviously, coming off early twice in the past 2 weeks. But for the Rabbitohs, let's not get all doom and gloom here. For the Rabbitohs, we have Latrell Mitchell at fullback, Alex Johnston and Isaac Thompson on the wings. I'd love to see a little bit more out of him defensively. I think that he has been found out a little bit, particularly by the Panthers last week. He's been found out a little bit in defense and with high kicks. I'd love to see him put in a big effort defensively and on those high kicks, when receiving the ball off a last tackle kick. I feel like Sam Walker and Luke Keary are going to target him with kicks here. I think he's got to be ready for it. Otherwise, there's going to be problems there. But yeah, look, I think that he has to really put in a big effort this week, particularly with his post-contact meters, which we know that he can really rack up a few of them. And, returning the ball after those last tackle kicks, once he's caught them, returning the ball, we know how good he is on his kick returns. We know how good he is in his kick returns. We've seen it in the trials. We saw it at the back end of last year as well. He's an absolute weapon. So I just can't wait to see that from him tonight. I really think we haven't seen the biggest, highest level of Isaac Thompson's game yet. I think he's still waiting to show us that. Campbell Graham, I think it's going to have to be a big game from him as well in the centres with Isaiah Tass. Cody Walker, Lockie Ilias in the halves, Tavita Totola and Tom Burgess in the front row, Damien Cook at 9, Keon Koloamatangi and Michael Cheekham there in the back row with Cam Murray at 13. Blake Taff, Hame Sele, Davey Moali, Shakai Mitchell on the bench. Fuck, that is an absolutely stacked bench there for the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Sele, Moale, and Shakai Mitchell. I mean, that is tough as nails. I think that the advantages South have here, one of them being the bench, particularly because obviously Hutcho, I don't think he's going to be coming on in the forwards. I think he had a little crack at back row last week. I just don't think he'll be coming on in the forwards. As I said, I think that Smith will be a late rule out. He'll come in at 9. But yeah, look, the rotation off the bench for the Roosters, I think South have an advantage here because they've only got one number 14 and they've got an absolutely stacked forward pack coming off the bench, and especially with Moale and Shakai Mitchell, who have had really strong games over the past 2 weeks. I think they're in for another really strong game here against the Roosters. Hame Sele as well, coming back from injury. I'm super keen to see him in his first game back, especially in a big game back like this against the Roosters. Tavita Totola returns as well. He's going to be in for a big game. I know he's in for a big game. Here, Tavita Totola. Keon Koloamatangi had a massive, massive game last week, moving into the middle as well, just to get a bit of size in the middle and aiming up there as well. Super proud of that. As a South fan, super proud of that. I think Campbell Graham's going to have a big game here in the centres, especially defending either Joseph Suaalii or Joseph Manu. Whoever he gets, it doesn't matter. They're both equally as dangerous, and I think that he's really going to have to put a massive defensive effort in here. And also Isaiah Tass as well, putting in a massive defensive effort. We know how South can run away with these games. For me, if I'm right, Brandon Smith misses this game and Drew Hutchison starts at 9. I've got the Rabbitohs winning this game. I've got the Rabbitohs winning regardless. I think that they really put a showing on against the Roosters. Just looking at their form, they have been a bit scrappy over the past few weeks. I think that South win this one. I've got a lot of Roosters players, coming at me saying that Roosters will definitely win this one. I don't think so. I really, really don't. I think South do win this one, particularly because of the bench rotation and the forward pack as well. Now Roosters, don't get me wrong, have a really strong forward pack, but I think the rotation is a little more well organised. I also think we have the advantage in the 9 jersey now. It's not just because Brandon Smith is injured. I think that Damien Cook, just his ability to make something out of nothing at a dummy half as well, his speed, scooting out a dummy half as well. Eyes up footy, the eyes up footy that Damien Cook can play at a dummy half. We've seen the best of Damien Cook. I think we're going to see the best of Damien Cook again in this game. I've got the Rabbitohs. Only 1-12. Anytime try scorers for me off the top of the dome, I am going to go for the Roosters. I'm going to take Manu. As I said, I think it's going to have to be a big game from Manu here. Obviously, second week back from injury, but against the Roosters, I feel like he's really going to step up in this one. For South Sydney, I'm going to go for a Rogie. I'm going to go for Damien Cook to score anytime. Yeah, so Damien Cook to score anytime. And Joseph Manu here, South 1-12. Going on to the Saturday games, we have the Titans v the Melbourne Storm to kick you off at 3 p.m. on your Super Saturday. This one's going to be an interesting one. Storm still missing Cameron Munster. The Dogs got the win over the Melbourne Storm on the weekend. Titans sustained a loss, one that was very, very unexpected. Titans are at home. I think that's going to be an advantage for them here. Storm without Munster. It's going to be very interesting to see how this game goes. They're also without Nelson Asofa Solomon and Melbourne, which is going to be very, very, very interesting. Tarek Sims comes into the team. Justin Olam returns, which is two massive wins here for Melbourne. Obviously, Tarek Sims getting his first crack in a Melbourne jersey. Yeah, very excited for this game. I think it could honestly go either way here, but let's go into the lineups before we say anything too ridiculous. So for the Titans, we've got Alexander Brimson at fullback. We've got Khan Pereira and Philip Sami on the wings. Obviously, Jojo Fafita is out. I believe he is injured. He could be suspended. I'll have to further look into that one. It's only Tuesday, so we haven't actually got the update yet. Brian Kelly and Aaron Shop are in the centers. I'm recording this on Tuesday, if you were wondering. Obviously said that earlier. But Brian Kelly and Aaron Shop are in the centers. Kieran Four and Tanner Boyd in the halves. We've got Fodawaker and Tino for Sulamala Aoi. Fuck, I nearly shut myself then. Fodawaker and Tino for Sulamala Aoi in the front row with Chris Randall at 9. David Fafita and Joe Stimson in the back row. Isaac Liu at 13. Jaden Campbell, Aaron Clark, Joe Vuna. I believe this guy is making his debut. Haven't heard the name before, so I assume he is making his debut. And Isaac Fasulamala-Awi. Now, that last name does sound familiar, particularly because I just said it. For the front rower, Tino Fasulamala-Awi, his brother Isaac is making his debut off the bench. Super keen for that one. Definitely one to watch there. Isaac Fasulamala-Awi. For the Melbourne Storm, we've got Nick Meaney at fullback. Will Warbrick and Xavier Coates on the wings. We've got Remus Smith and Justin Olam in the centers. That is super dangerous for me. Nick Meaney, his form over the past few weeks has been outstanding. Will Warbrick, I think that he has got a lot more potential to unlock over the next few weeks. Xavier Coates, outstanding player. We know the potential he has. Remus Smith, Justin Olam returning as well. Fuck, that is going to be so, so cool to see. Tyron Wishart and Jerome Hughes in the halves. Look, I was a bit 50-50 on Tyron Wishart last week, but Jerome Hughes really carried for this Melbourne team. Even though they did lose the game, Jerome Hughes was a big factor in how they played. Tui Kamika and Christian Welsh in the front row. Harry Grant at 9. He is going to be big for them. He is going to be the make or break of this Melbourne team. Harry Grant. So is Jerome Hughes. Trent Lorio and Elise Katoa. Elise Katoa has been fucking phenomenal over the past few weeks as well. I am super keen to see how this guy goes in the back row here. Josh King at 13. Jonah Pezzett. I've been so keen for this guy to make his debut. If you listen to the podcast, you know how keen I have been for this guy to make his debut, and he's getting a crack here. Alec McDonald, Tarek Sims making his Storm debut, and Jordan Grant on the bench. I am so keen for Melbourne. I'm so keen for the Titans. A debutant for the Titans, a debutant for the Melbourne Storm as well. I know BKR Sport would be so keen to see how Isaac Fasulamala-Awi and Joe Vuna go. He'd know a lot more about them than I do. I'm actually quite keen to see Chris Randall. He's obviously had a lot of experience from last year, obviously covering for Blake Bradley the last time he was injured. So he's got a lot of game experience. He's played most of the games last year. Coming into this Titans team, replacing Sam Verrills, who I believe is suspended. Yeah, I'm super keen to see it. Super keen to see it there, Chris Randall. And then Jaden Campbell off the bench, the combination he has with AJ Brimson, we've seen it against, obviously, we've seen it against the West Tigers in round one. I'm super keen to see it again and I think that Campbell needs to play more minutes as well. He needs more minutes in this side. It's one of the reasons that they lost last week because Jaden Campbell didn't get enough minutes. There was a lot more factors, obviously, discipline and, motivation as well out there. Effort areas were concerning, but I thought that Jaden Campbell needed more minutes to sort of be the game breaker for them for the Titans. But we're not talking about that. I just feel like he needs more minutes and that he needs to come in earlier in this game, especially against Melbourne. Melbourne coming off a loss as well, keen to get a win. It's not often you see Melbourne get 2 losses in a row unless you're living in last year. And I think last year is the exception, not the rule. It's not often you see Melbourne get 2 losses in a row. I think they come in. I think they get the win here. I think they get the win 1-12. I'm a bit filthy that Bronson Garlick isn't in the team. Didn't really hear his name much last week, but I'm a little bit filthy that he didn't get another crack here off the bench. They have got Tarek Sims. So, I think they are giving up a bit of size there. They have already got a back rower on the bench. They've got Jonah Pezzett here as well making his debut, which I am super fucking keen for. So it sort of makes up for it a little bit. But I would have loved to see Bronson Garlick still get a crack regardless. But Jonah Pezzett, a guy I'm keen to see come off the bench, a guy I'm keen to see what role he plays in this Melbourne team as well. Super keen to see Jonah Pezzett off the bench. But I have got Melbourne. 1-12. They've got the hooking advantage. I think they've got the halfback advantage. I think Tanner Boyd really needs to have a big game in this one, particularly if the Gold Coast Titans are to pull off a big win against Melbourne here. They're obviously going to be quite confident because they saw the Bulldogs and what they did last week to Melbourne. I think the Titans will come into this one with a little bit more pep in their step because they know it's possible to beat the Melbourne Storm. However, I'm going to take Melbourne. I'm going to take Melbourne 1-12. I think they've got the advantage here. I think they get the job done against the Titans. Anytime try scorers for the Gold Coast Titans, I'm going to take Khan Pereira. I know it's a boring answer. He's a winger. Wingers score tries. That's what they do. It's what they're paid for. I'm going to take Khan Pereira for the Gold Coast Titans. For the Melbourne Storm, I'm actually going to take Jonah Pezzett off the bench. That's how keen I am on this guy. I'm going for the Rogie. I'm going for the debutant to score a try in his debut game. I'm going for Jonah Pezzett there. I don't think it's going to be one of those games where the Melbourne Storm are winning so much that they bring on, Jonah Pezzett for more minutes and give Jerome Hughes a rest and blah, blah, blah. Melbourne get on a roll. I don't think it's going to be that game at all. It's going to be a tight one. I think Melbourne only win it just, but I think that Pezzett is brought on as the game breaker and he scores a try in this game. Going on to the next one, though, the Cowboys and the Warriors. We've seen how well the Warriors don't do at home. And they've got a few outs here as well, which are a bit concerning. They've got a new fullback here in Tane Tuaupiki. I believe that's how you pronounce that one. I bloody hope it is. I had a fair crack at that one. But Chancey Clockstart is out, so obviously he takes that role there. Tuaupiki. And then we've also got Jackson Ford out, so Muradinir Corey takes that spot there. And Bailey Sirenen comes onto the bench for the Warriors. But let's have a look at the lineups here. Obviously, Scott Drinkwater is out for the Cowboys, obviously due to suspension. Another out here is Peter Hiku as well, who I believe is also suspended. So 2 big outs there for the Cowboys. I don't think it's going to affect them too much because it's another guy I've been hyping up absolutely through the roof, and it is Tom Chester in the fullback jersey. I'm super keen to see how Tom Chester goes. I think it's going to be a big game for him. Kyle Felt and Murray Taulagi on the wings. We have Valentine Holmes at one center. We have Jer Amat, I believe that's how you pronounce that. Shibasaki. I'm just going to say Shibazaki as the last name so I don't fuck up the name any more than I already have. But Shibazaki is on the other center. That name does sound familiar. Why? Because he played for the Newcastle Knights last year. He's obviously come to the North Queensland Cowboys this year to have another crack at first grade with a different team. And he's getting his crack here in round 3 against the Warriors. Tom Dearden, Chad Townsend in the halves. We have Jordan McLean and Ruben Cotter in the front row. Reece Robson at 9. I've got Cohen Hess and Jeremiah Nanai in the back row. Jason Taumalola at 13. And then Jake Granville, Griffin Name, Jermaine Tomoa-Brown, and James Tarmo there on the bench. For the Warriors, we have Tane Tuia Upiki. Tuia got to say that name a few times so it gets stuck in the old melon there because we don't know how long Chancellor Clockstart is going to be out. Tane Tuia Piki at fullback. We've got Edward Cozzi and Marcelo Montoya on the wings. Braden Williami and Adam Pompey in the centers, Tamale Martin and Sean Johnson in the halves. We've got Adam Fanua-Blake, who had a fucking phenomenal game in round 1 and played quite good in round 2 as well. And Bunty Afoa starting in the front row with Wade Egan at 9. Mitch Barnett moves into the back row, obviously, since Bunty Afoa has moved into the front. Mitch Barnett moves into the back row here with Marta Niakore. Tohu Harris is at 13. Dylan Walker, Josh Curran, Bailey Sirenen, and Tom Alley is on the bench here for the New Zealand Warriors. We've got the Cowboys at home. We know that Warriors don't go too well outside of New Zealand. So I'm taking the Cowboys. I'm taking the Cowboys 1-12. I don't think it's going to be a big win. I still feel like the Warriors are going to put up a fight. But I'm going to take the Cowboys. I'm going to take them 1-12, particularly as well because both teams are missing their fullbacks. It's not just one. Scott Drinkwater's also out, and so is Peter Hickey as well. So, that Cowboys still have a lot more, of their first graders than the Warriors do. But yeah, look, I'm super, super keen to see how this game goes. For me, it could almost go either way, depending on if the Warriors find that hunger that they had in the trials. But I've got the Cowboys. I've got them 1-12. I think they still get the win here. Anytime try scorers. Going rogue, I'm going to go with Tom Chester at 1 for the Cowboys to score a try. I think he scores a try in his first crack in a starting role. And then for the Warriors, I think that the effort from last week needs to be rewarded. I'm going to go for a rogie. I'm going to go for Tohu Harris in the 13 jersey to score a try here for the Warriors. So Cowboys 1-12 in this game is the way I'm going there with Tom Chester and Tohu Harris in as my anytime try scorers. Broncos v the Dragons at 7:35 on your Super Saturday. I think this is going to be the blowout game of the weekend. I think that it was just a one-shot kid effort there from the Dragons. I mean, I don't want to be all negativo on the Dragons here, but I think that what Brisbane did the other week, it just shows the effort level. It just shows, how red hot they are coming into this season. I think they get a big win here, the Brisbane Broncos over the Dragons. So for Brisbane, we have Reece Walsh at fullback. Jesse Arthurs comes in. Obviously, Corey Oates is going to be out for a long while with that broken jaw. Selwyn Cobbo is on the other wing. Tony Staggs and Herbie Farnworth are in the centres. Ezra Mam and Adam Reynolds are in the halves. Corey Jensen and Payne Haas are in the front row. Billy Walters at 9. Kurt Capewell and Jordan Ricky are in the back row. Patrick Carrigan at 13. And then we've got Corey Pakes, Keenan Palacia, Tom Flegler, and Martin Tapau there on the bench for the Brisbane Broncos. Now, for the Dragons, we've got Tyrell Sloan at fullback, Matthew Fagai and Michaele Ravalawa on the wings. We've got Moses Sully and Zach Lomax in the centres. Jaden Sullivan and Ben Hunt are in the halves. Francis Molo and Blake Laurie are in the front row with Moses Mbai at 9. We've got Ben Murdoch-Masilla and Jaden Sewer in the back row with Jack Bird at 13. Jacob Little, who had a really good game last week. Zane Musgrove, Toby Couchman, who I thought did okay for a debutant. And Josh Kerr on the bench there for the Dragons. Now, keen to see if Amone gets a crack back in this team. I think it's sort of the approach where they're making him work his way back into the side. Obviously, some internal issues between him and Zach Lomax earlier in the preseason. And then obviously, he's been out for a while, stood down by the team. Um, yeah, look, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if he does get a crack over the next few weeks. I think it definitely helped the Dragons and make them play even better than how they came into last week. But yeah, look, I think it's a one-shot kid effort. I think that the Broncos get a big win here, 13 plus. I mean, just some of the individuals in this team, like Reece Walsh, Herbie Farnworth, Ezra Mam the other week as well. Payne Haas in the front row, Carrigan as the leader. And all the other guys as well that I haven't said. Adam Reynolds as well was outstanding last week in terms of his kicking game. Was very, very close to making my team of the week. I think he was there even on the bench. But yeah, look, I mean, I've got the Broncos here. I've got them 13 plus. I think they've got advantages all over the park. I think they get the job done. Broncos 13 plus for me. Anytime try scorers, I'm going to go for Reece Walsh at fullback for anytime try scorer. For the Dragons, I am going to go and say Jack Bird at 13 as a bit of a roguey there. Don't think it will come through, but Jack Bird is my roguey there from the Dragons. If I had to pick two anytime try scorers to make it a little bit easier on the punter for the Broncos, it'd probably have to be Reece Walsh and Herbie Farnworth, my two guys from last week. Obviously, Herbie Farnworth got denied last week. I don't think that's going to happen again this week. I think it's Reece Walsh and Herbie Farnworth. I think that's a pretty fair crack going into this weekend. So Broncos 13 plus. Going into your Sunday games, we have the Bulldogs v the West Tigers. This one's going to be super interesting. Dane Laurie's out, which I think is a massive loss here for the West Tigers. Also, a few outs for them, including Dane Laurie, Isaiah Papali'i, Jake Simkin, who's the 14, and Tommy Talau. I think a few massive losses there for the West Tigers due to suspension and injuries. So I think the Bulldogs do have a massive advantage here. If there wasn't already a massive advantage, obviously them being the home team. Obviously the Dragons, the West Tigers, they do have a few players out going into this game. Didn't rate Charlie Staines at fullback. I don't rate him as a fullback, entirely. I think that he is a winger at this stage in his career. Obviously, they've got to fill spots. I think that he's going to do okay. I think that he's got all the potential in the world. But look, I think that he is he's very similar to Sam Walker in some aspects in terms of he always likes to go for the big play, even when it's not on, and sometimes it costs the team. And that's no disrespect to Sam Walker. Obviously, both of these guys are still quite young. They don't have a lot of experience yet. But look, I think that is going to be something that the I think it's going to hurt the West Tigers if it does happen. If it doesn't, and I'm completely wrong, I'm happy for West Tigers fans to shit on my face when the Tigers win 13 plus. But yeah, look, I think it's just not going to happen here. I think that the Bulldogs are going to come in red hot, a lot of confidence after beating a side like Melbourne. And I think that they're going to get a big win here over the West Tigers. It's a big call, particularly since I had both of these teams in my top 8 prediction. But I think the Bulldogs do get a big win here. Let's go through the lines before we say anything too rash. Hayes Perham is at fullback. Jacob Carraz and Josh Adokar are on the wings. We have Jake Avarillo and Paul Alamotti in the centers. Matt Burton and Kyle Flanagan in the halves. Max King and Ryan Sutton are in the front row with Reid Marnie at 9. Viliami Kikau and Jacob Preston. Jacob Preston getting a start. I love that in the back row with Raymond Faitala Mariner at 13. Bit questionable about Jaden Ockenbaugh coming off the bench. I just don't know how he's going to be used in his team. I really don't. It's just a weird one. It really is. I'd love to see a Josh Reynolds get a crack at 14. I'd love to see Jackson Topine get a crack. But yeah, look, very interesting one having Ockenbaugh on the bench. I don't think he provides too much coming off the bench other than playing maybe a little bit of fullback, can play on the wing or at center. Other than that, he doesn't do too much for you. Corey Waddell, Franklin Pele, and Farmanu Brown on the bench. Farmanu Brown's the interesting one for me. I think he can do a lot more for you off the bench. It's a big move here, a big move that I didn't really think about before, but Raymond Faitala Mariner, he's at 13. He's been moved to the middle. I'd love to see the impact that has. I think that he is more of that battering ram ball playing 13 that the Tigers, that the Bulldogs were trying to get out of Farmani Brown. The thing with Farmani Brown, not only is he a much smaller body than Raymond Fatala Mariner, but he isn't the battering ram 13. He's the ball playing roaming 13, and that's where he went quite well for the West Tigers when he was there. His defense was outstanding, but he was great when he was just, that second 5'8" sort of player for the West Tigers in that 13 jersey when he was there for only a short while. So, yeah, look, I'm very keen to see how he's used off the bench. If he's used like a 14 player or what, I'm very keen to see how he's used. But, yeah, look, very interesting move there from the Bulldogs, and let's see if it pays off. I think it's going to be a big game from Reid Marnie, also from Matt Burton here. Burton, I think he's going to get back into that sort of winning form that he was in at the back end of last year. Kyle Flanagan as well. And Hayes Perham, I'm keen to see big things from Hayes Perham. He had a big game against Melbourne last week. Keen to see it again against the West Tigers. And speaking of the Tigers, let's go through this lineup. So Charlie Staines is at fullback, David Nofaluma and Junior Tupou on the wing. Love Junior Tupou on the wing. This guy is a first grader, and he's definitely one to watch there, the number 5 jersey. Brent Naden and Stafford Toa in the centres. Adam Dewey and Luke Brooks there in the halves. Stefano Utakamanu and Apisai Coruscant. Stefano Utakamanu and David Clemmer in the front row. Api Coruscant is at 9. Asu Kapoa, Sean Bloor and Fanua Pole in the back row there. Then we have Brendan Wakeham, Alex Twall, Joe Offahangawi. Joe Offahangawi benched is a big call here from the Tigers. Joe Offahangawi is their 13. There's no question about that. You don't just chop and change when your side isn't going too well. Bit disappointed about that one. And Braden Tummuth on the bench there, who got a crack last week as well off the bench for the West Tigers. Very, very keen to be proven wrong by the West Tigers, but I think it's a Bulldogs win here. They've got a really solid side on paper, a bit of confidence after their win against the Melbourne Storm. Bulldogs 13 plus for me, and I'm not the guy that goes for 2 13 plus games in a week, but I think the Bulldogs get the job done over the West Tigers and done well 13 plus in this one without Dane Laurie, who's one of their big effort guys at fullback. Isaiah Papali'i in the back row as well. John Bateman was supposed to get a crack as well, and he's not there. Simpkins out. Tommy Talau, a big effort guy in the centers, is out. I mean, Bulldogs 13 plus for me. It just screams Bulldogs 13 plus. Anytime try scorers, I'm going to go for Jake Averillo. Had a big game last week. I think that he goes over the line. And then for the West Tigers, just to be, sentimental to West Tigers fans here, I'm going to go for David Nofaluma, cult hero over there. I think that he scores a try in a big moment in this game, which makes the West Tigers maybe look like they're trying to come back into this one, but I am taking that Bulldogs 13 plus line there. And then the final game of the round is the Raiders v the Sharkies at 6:15 on Sunday. For the Raiders, I'm looking for them to have a big game in this one. They need to have a big game coming off a loss. Looking for the Raiders to have a big game here against the Sharkies. But, I think the Sharkies do get it done here. A non-change side from last week. No changes in this side other than Connor Tracy dropping out and Jack Williams dropping back in. Other than that, there's no changes. I mean, Sharkies get the job done here for me against the Raiders. But let's have a look at the lineups here. For the Raiders, we have Seb Chris at fullback. Again, I'm a bit against Seb Chris at fullback. I would rather someone else. I really would. But it's only for the next few weeks. And it's only early rounds as well. So I'm not too fussed about it. But, I don't think he's a fullback for me. I think he'd be much more destructive at centre. But Seb Chris at fullback, Kotrick and Albert Hopewadi on the wing. Like even Albert Hopewadi at fullback, we saw him there for Manly, and I thought he did quite well. So I would love to see Albert Hopewadi have a crack at fullback maybe. Matthew Timoko and Harley Smith-Shields in the centres. Harley Smith-Shields, a guy that I've had raps on for a while, just a big effort guy for them in the centres. Jack White and Jamal Fogarty in the halves. Basami Solo, who I've been really impressed with. being a starter in this side in place of obviously Josh Papali'i and Joseph Tarpanay in the front row, Danny Levi at 9, Hudson Young, Elliot Whitehead in the back row, Corey Harawira-Naira at 13, been really, really impressed with him at 13. Tom Starling, Trey Mooney makes his debut finally. Well, not debut, but he gets another crack at in first grade finally. Corey Horsburgh and Emre Gula on the bench there for the Raiders. Pretty strong bench, pretty strong forward pack here for the Raiders. And then for the Sharkies, we have Will Kennedy at fullback, Sione Katoa and Ronaldo Mulatalo on the wings, Jesse Ramian and CSC Vitalakai in the centers, Matt Moylan, Braden Trindle in the halves, Toby Rudolph and Braden Hamanueli in the front row, Blake Braley at 9. I'm losing my voice a little bit. And Britton Nakora and Teg Wilton in the back row, Dalphin Nukin at lock, Cam McInnes, Royce Hunt, Oregon Kafusi, Jack Williams on the bench there for the Cronulla Sharks. I've got the Sharks. I've only got them 1 to 12. I don't think it's going to be a big win. I think the forward pack for Canberra is going to be very advantageous and very helpful for guys like Danny Levi and Tom Starling to get this Raiders side on a roll at home as well. I think the Raiders do have that advantage. I do think the Sharks win this game, though. They have a pretty similar side to last week. They went quite well last week as well in that win against Parramatta. Will Kennedy, quite strong. Braden Trindle having a great effort there in the number 7 jersey. Toby Rudolph and Braden Hamanueli in the front row. Massive effort last week. I've got the Sharkies. I've got them 1 to 12. And then anytime try scorers for me, I'm going to go for Jack Whiten at 6. And then I'm going to go for Ronaldo Mulatalo on the wing there for the Sharkies. There you go. That is your round 3 preview going into this week.